Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining today's Lunch and Learn, the last for the month of February. Very happy that you're here with us today. Very excited for our speaker. Um, as always, through the Lunch and Learn series, which we offer twice a month, we aim to bring you very interesting and timely information. So whether you are a volunteer, a community sponsor, or someone considering becoming a sponsor, resettlement agency staff, a local advocate, or someone who's just interested in learning more about sponsorship and ways to welcome, we hope that you find today's session informative and engaging. Today's session is titled From Sponsors to Advocates, Widening the Welcome. Just as a quick level set, if you're not familiar, Refugee Welcome Collective, we collaborate with partners to provide in-depth training, bi-monthly learning sessions, resources, on-demand technical assistance for sponsors, resettlement agency staff, refugees paired with sponsors, community and institutional partners, and others to support quality community sponsorship programs across the country. And on the next slide, just to go through just a few quick housekeeping items. As you join, you are automatically muted. However, after the presentation, we'll have an opportunity to, to come on and to ask any questions that you might have. And there's also the chat function as well if you need to, want to drop a question or comment in the chat as well. And you can also use the chat function if you're having any sort of technical issues. The presentation is being recorded. And so afterward, we will send out an email to all those who participated so that you have a recording of today's session. And if there's any resources that we flag, we'll make sure to include that as well as a survey, which we'll share at the end of this session as well for your feedback. All right, so with that, I'm going to turn it over to our presenters. We're really excited to have Nancy with us, who's part of a sponsor group in Kansas called McPherson Welcomers. Today we're going to hear about their experiences. They have together collectively resettled 4 individual households, and I believe will continuing to engage in this work. They are situated some distance from the nearest resettlement office, and so this group has done incredible work in making connections in the community to help facilitate the family's initial reception and long-term integration. And so today they're going to share the joys and the challenges, and it's also, I believe, a really important call and a good example to show that it's possible in case anyone's considering welcoming in this way, whether it's through the different models of sponsorship that are currently available, like co-sponsorship and partner with a resettlement agency, or through Welcome Corps, or even sponsor circles programs as well. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Nancy. Thank you so much, and really excited that you're here.
Thank you, David. We're really happy to have the chance to talk about our resettlement experience here in central Kansas. I'm going to be doing a lot of the talking to start with, but there are several other members from our group that are on with us, and they'll be chiming in at different times during our presentation. So if you want to go to the next slide, Grace, I'm going to tell you how it all started. Our resettlement journey began in August of 2022. By then, the Russian invasion of Ukraine was several months old. We all were concerned, of course, but we didn't have any answers to what we could do about it. Then I happened across a little article called Connect with a Ukrainian, which briefly described the Uniting for Ukraine program. I'm a member of our church's outreach team, so I sent the team a quick email asking, do you think we can do this? And at our next meeting, we decided, yes, we can, and the rest is history. This is not an official project of our church. The outreach team recommended that the church offer their support, but not be in control. So control of what we have done remains with our McPherson Welcomers group. Can I have the next slide, Grace? So it was one thing to say we were going to do something, but it was another thing to determine specifically who is willing to be involved and how can we make it happen. I contacted others through our Sunday school group, the outreach team, through our church newsletter, just spreading word. that way. And we ended up with a core group of 18 of us who were on board and have remained involved ever since, plus a host of others who have helped in various ways. We were guided in large part by the host of fact sheets and other information that's available from welcome.us, from the Refugee Welcome Collective, Church World Service, and other sources, including the Refugee Welcome Collective Manual for sponsors, which was really helpful to us. So the next question was, where are the finances going to come from for us to do this, for us to, to say that we could support these families for up to 2 years? We never fundraised per se. We just really felt that our group and the members of our congregation would come forward and step up as they had done for many other projects in the past. After some months, the church did set up an account where we could receive donations and disperse funds, and they have provided us with meeting space and offered other support, but the effort continues to be directed by our support circle. So by the late in the fall of 2022, we had connected with a family of 4 through the Welcome Connect website, and after some discussion, we agreed to sponsor them. We completed the required forms I-134A for each of them, and we received approval for them to travel within a few weeks. So in early December of 2022, my husband Paul and I traveled to Dallas and picked them up at the airport. We had not yet been able to locate appropriate housing for them, so we moved them into our small house. And while we spent our days together with them, we went to our son's house to sleep overnight. The day after they arrived here in McPherson, a friend of theirs who had already immigrated to Houston called them and said he had housing available and a job that could be lined up for them. So they talked with us at length about this situation. Eventually, we together agreed that it was an opportunity they could not pass up. They were torn as they certainly felt some obligation to us, but we recognized that we needed to let them go with our blessing. So they arrived and they left within one weekend. Most of the people who had joined with us and worked so hard to arrange for their arrival never even got to meet them. Happily, we are still in contact with this family and they are doing well in Houston. And there is certainly some satisfaction that our group was instrumental in bringing them to safety in the United States. There was, however, of course, a sense of disappointment and some guilt on my part, for this had been my idea and I had brought a lot of people on board to help. So at that point, we decided to take a pause until after Christmas. And after the first of the year, we regrouped and the group decided we needed to try again. So we moved forward with our after our initial disappointment. Can we have the next slide, Grace? We went back to the welcome.us website and made a connection with another family of 4. And the second family we sponsored is what we call a match made in heaven. We could not have asked for a better family to work with. They are personable, accomplished, hardworking, motivated, and it doesn't hurt that they have 2 adorable little girls. The father is a born leader, and their presence in our community has been an absolute joy. Next slide. This is just a slide of the day after they arrived. The house we have for them is situated in a neighborhood where there are several retired couples, and they had heard that these Ukrainians were going to be arriving and moving into this rental house in their neighborhood. And so as soon as they saw that they were there, this elderly couple came bustling from across the street to welcome them to the neighborhood. And we've blurred the faces of our newcomers, but in that middle photo, I wish you could see the look. The mother in the family is looking into the eyes of the older lady from across the street, and there's just a connection and a look of pure joy between the 2 of them. So next slide, please. Since then, our little Ukrainian community has grown to 6 adults and 3 children, as well as 2 families that we have who are still waiting for approval to come. So I'm going to talk briefly about the process we use to find and welcome the newcomers to town. Next slide, please. We did complete a profile on the welcome.us website. We started with the information that we found there on how to do this. One person has to complete the training that they have there, and I did that. I found it very helpful and informative, and I really would recommend it for anyone who wants to sponsor. Then, of course, you can connect with Ukrainians there who are looking for sponsors. And once we put our profile up, almost immediately, we got several responses to our profile. And that then comes the difficult task of sorting through those and deciding which ones might be a good match for us. You can talk back and forth with them, as many of you may know, using the translation service. It's available on the site. You can also take your conversations off the site and use email, Facebook, WhatsApp. You can do video chats or whatever you choose. So together, we finally, I mean, it's really hard, to connect with people and then, to have to say, we're not going to sponsor you, but we eventually connected with the second family and made a decision to offer our sponsorship. And then we submitted the required forms, I-134A for each family member, submitted it to USCIS and waited for our travel approval. While we were waiting for that approval of the first family, I became aware of the Church World Service remote support program. I contacted them and I got connected with Katie Randall, who I think I saw her name on the list of people who are with us today. Katie was so helpful and so supportive throughout the whole process. She was with us through the disappointment of the first family leaving and then us connecting with the second family. And we're very grateful for her support. And later, Derek Feldman also was helped with his support from Church World Service. As part of our connection with that program, we were required to complete a welcome plan. And that was very helpful to us as we prepared for the newcomers. It required us to research the resources in our community, like housing, employment, ESL classes, school contacts, etc. Once we knew that initial family had 2 teenagers who would need to be enrolled with school, we knew we needed to make some contacts with the school district. We happened to have several retired educators in our group, and one of them, Tina Burkholder, offered to make the initial school contacts, and I'm going to let Tina share just a bit about that process with you. Are you there, Tina? I saw your name on the list. There she is. Okay, can you?
Okay, now can you hear me?
Yes, go right ahead.
Okay. I'm a retired teacher. I most recently moved from Omaha, Nebraska, so I had a lot of experience with ESL students. And having retired in McPherson, which is a much smaller community, one of our concerns was that Russian-speaking ESL students might be very new for the district. And so we wanted to give them a heads up what was coming their way. So we met with the ESL teachers, but we also met with the administration in central office, mostly to let them know what our plans were and that children would be coming. And then also for us to be able to see how, what kind of services the kids would be getting. In the process, we found out that there's a 3rd grade teacher in our community who does speak Russian. And so that was a pleasant surprise. And you'll hear more about her later on today. And we also, they welcomed us to have private tours of the schools for the children, which was just even better because we felt like this would be a great way for the kids to get acclimated to their new surroundings with a private tour.
Thank you, Tina. Of all the preparations we had to make for the family to arrive, housing has been our biggest challenge. Like many other communities, affordable housing can be hard to come by. And even for some of the housing that was available, we found that traditional landlords were reluctant to work with us because they required applications, background checks, etc., requirements that were difficult for us to meet when we were working with people who were coming from other countries. In the end, we found it was really helpful to leverage our existing connections that we had. Do you want to go to the next slide, Grace? I made an announcement in church that we were having difficulty locating housing for the family. And after church, one of our members, who was a retired contractor, mentioned that he had a friend who was remodeling a rental house, and he connected us. It has 2 bedrooms. You have to see it right here. It has 2 bedrooms, 1 bath, no basement, but a big fenced-in backyard where we put a swing set for the little girls. The family loves it and continues to care for it with pride. 3 of the 4 homes that we have located are single family, middle class, neat and tidy homes. The 4th is a roomy 2-bedroom apartment occupying the main floor of the larger home. Each home we prepared for the new arrivals with a little work and a lot of love. Once travel approval was received, that's where the real fun begins. There's no standard time for how long this is going to happen. Most of our approvals took about a month or 2, but one was approved in 1 week after we submitted it, which was shocking to us. And we really had to scramble with that one to get the house ready for that household. Since that time, though, since our initial 3 households have been settled, they all happened quite quickly. One came in mid-May, one came in mid-June, and the last one came at the end of the June. So within 6 weeks, you know, we had all those 3 households here at once. And we submitted then an application for another family of 4 at the end of June. And unfortunately, we are still waiting for approval for that family 8.5 months later. And we have another family that we submitted about a month and a half ago that we're still waiting for. So who knows how long it's going to take for those to be approved. The Ukrainian families made their own travel arrangements with some input from us in what airports were close by. Can you go to the next slide, Grace? The next thing was we had to decide who was going to meet them at the airport. And those airport arrivals can be really quite special. My husband and I traveled to Dallas and got the initial family. I don't have a picture of them here, but then the first family that stayed would be on the left there. They flew into the tiny Salina, Kansas airport, which is just about 30 miles from us. And we went along with Steve and Tina Burkholder, who took their pickup to bring the luggage. When the next group arrived, we were out of state. So Steve and Tina actually traveled to Kansas City to pick them up. And then our third family over on the right, they flew into the Wichita airport. So Tina is going to share you a little bit about their experience in picking up the second group in Kansas City.
When Nancy and Paul picked up the first family in Salina, the one on the left, Steve and I took our pickup along to help carry just the luggage. And around that same time, I had been going to Nancy's house when she was listening to the different training seminars that were helping her understand better what all needed to be done. And a combination of seeing how you could make an emotional connection with the family by really getting involved in the pickup, as well as all the things that came after that, as well as realizing that Nancy and Paul had a huge job. I asked Nancy if she felt like maybe Steve and I could be the lead for the 2 single guys that needed to be picked up at Kansas City, and she said absolutely. So they came at an evening flight. Steve and I really didn't care to drive home after midnight. It's about a 3-hour drive from our home. And so we made arrangements for all of us to stay all night at his sister-in-law's, my sister-in-law's house, Steve's sister. So that's the picture in the middle. In some ways, this was a really big challenge. These 2 young men were brand new to our country, meeting people that they didn't know. And right off the bat, we're asking them to stay all night in a house in Kansas City with people that they don't know. To make this a little bit easier, we brought the leader, the guy that we're calling the leader of the group, and we nicknamed him Joe for the presentations. That's not his real name, but we had Joe come along because he, first of all, was a great translator. Secondly, he's a good friend of theirs. And thirdly, he's just such a great leader that we felt like if there's any feelings of trepidation, that he would be able to make this a very much easier arrival for the guys. So Steve and I were happy to be able to welcome them at the airport. We stayed all night and came home the next day, and we have been with them through all the steps all along the way ever since.
Thanks, Tina. I'm now going to turn to Bev Nye. She was involved in that situation with picking up these two guys in Kansas in Kansas City in a different way, and I'm going to ask her to tell you about that experience. Can you unmute, Bev, and go ahead?
Oh, yes.
There,
Hello.
thank you.
I'm Bev Nye. And like Tina said, that the two young men that you pictured in the middle, they came to the Kansas City airport a little before midnight, and that's why they spent the night. Well, Joe was needed as an interpreter, and Joe's wife supported that, wanted him to go along as an interpreter, but she was scared to death to just a few weeks into, moving into a new house, new city, new country, staying all night by herself. And she knew very little English at the time. And so I offered to spend the night with Joe's wife and the two little girls, and she took me up on it, which I was honored that she trusted me. So went over there when Joe left for Kansas City, and I enjoyed the games and the things we did. And then we got ready for bed, and I slept on their couch. And before bedtime, the girls were in their PJs, and I was lying on the bed, on the couch, and they came in the living room, a darkened living room. They jumped up and lay on top of me, and I turned my reading light up to the ceiling, and the 6-year-old taught me how to form my fingers to make certain shadow puppets. And so we did that for about 15 minutes. And of course, the 2-year-old joined in, and we had our animals interacting with each other, and we laughed and laughed. Then the next morning, Joe's wife made a wonderful breakfast for me and the girls. And at that point, Joe's wife and I, in our friendship, we relied heavily on using the translation app on our phones. And I remember when breakfast was almost over, she talked into her phone and then handed it to me so that I could read the English translation. And I remember reading, "Would you like some more fried testicles?" And I just said, "No, thank you, I'm full." But it was a nice time to spend with them.
So thanks, Bev. As Tina mentioned, once these three households started arriving all at once, we realized that, we did need to divide up the responsibilities. So each of the households now have a lead couple. We kept the first family. Tina and Steve kept the two guys, and then Phil and Ann Stover have been the lead couple for the third household. And that doesn't mean we have to do everything for them, because obviously we have busy lives and other things to do. But whenever possible, that lead couple is responsible for getting them to their appointments and helping them schedule things and all the other things that go along with getting them transitioned. Do you want to go to the next slide, please, Grace? We already mentioned the challenge we had of locating housing. One thing that was not much of a problem was furnishing the houses. We had nearly everything we needed to completely furnish 4 households donated to us from people inside and outside our church. We found that people were really eager to help. And a lot of people our age are anxious to get rid of furniture. So we had no trouble accumulating a lot of furniture to furnish the houses. And when it's time to stock the pantry, there's a suggested list of things that you put in the pantry for the family's arrival that will last them for 2 or 3 weeks. And we had a coffee group, a ladies' coffee group from our church that said, just stepped up and said, we'll take care of that. Another issue was transportation. Living in a relatively small town here in Kansas, we don't have public transportation. So initially we provided bicycles for all of our people, our adults, plus a cart for little girls. They managed quite well with the bikes for the first several months. When they first came, we oriented them to our city. We made a folder for each family that had a map of the city, pictures of the important buildings in town, a page that was about 911, how to call 911 and who you called that for. Also the names and phone numbers of all the people in our welcomers group. So they had a list of people they could call when they needed help with anything. As I said, we don't have a public bus system, but we do have form of public transportation operated by our senior center for $1 per ride each way. You can get a ride anywhere in our city. It's only available weekdays from 9 to 3, but that did provide another resource for our people to use. I mean, we bought them, each household, a punch card that was good for 20 rides for them to use. And they did use that bus to take them to Walmart and run other errands. We had 2 children that we needed to enroll in school amongst our next 3 households. We have 1 first grader and we have 1 middle schooler. So again, we took advantage of our retired educators. Since we'd already made contact with the school before that initial family came, who went to Houston, we just had to re-engage with the school again and let them know that we had children arriving, and they arranged for private tours of the school, and they've been very helpful and accommodating. As you can see from this other list, there's a lot of other things, we had to deal with, health exams, and this entire list. We did have some help from the International Rescue Committee with this, which is located in Wichita, about an hour from us. They did help schedule some of the appointments. They helped with some of the paperwork. One thing we had to do was, determine what English speaking level our folks were at and what classes might be available for them. So Tina's going to share just briefly about the help we were able to provide them with some outside English lessons in addition to the other resources we found.
So International Rescue Committee has been very helpful to us through the many different steps that we've needed to take in getting them settled. And part of that includes English language lessons. Now, it's about an hour drive from here, so we didn't even and taking classes in person, but they were able to take English lessons online through their phone. So we started out by teaching them how to do that and encouraging them. Really what all of the adults really wanted was they wanted in-person lessons. And so I was able to purchase some curriculum that was recommended to me by a retired teacher who had found some ESL adult curriculum that she really liked. So I started giving lessons twice a week to everybody except for Joe. His English was good enough, and he was also busy enough trying to find work that he didn't participate in that. We did experiment of taking some lessons that was in a church here in town. We did do a little bit of that, but in the end, it was the personal lessons that they liked the best. Another thing that we started pretty soon after that was the realization that we have 4 adult men and 2 adult women, and we felt like that the women really needed more than just English lessons. They needed some women friendships. And so we started a women's coffee that was meant to be part emotional support, part practice English in conversation. And then last, 2 out of the 3 children are still getting help learning English. They're in school, so they're getting the ESL support. but they also are getting private tutors from us after school twice a week.
Thanks, Tina. Most of you may be aware that some of the benefits are available to the Ukrainian newcomers that we were able to access with these initial 3 households are no longer available as of last September 30th. But when we brought our people, they were able to get health insurance, either Medicaid for the families that had children or refugee medical assistance. We did need to make sure that we could find medical providers who would accept those. We were able to do that. It was easier for the 2 families who got Medicaid. There were a number of providers who were willing to accept them. The single guys who only got the refugee medical insurance, that was more of a challenge. But we fortunately were able to find a local medical provider who happens to go to our church. He's done mission work. He was willing to accept them and their insurance. And we also had another connection through our church family for a young lady who's a dentist here in town. And she has accepted all of our people as her patients. They do now have dental insurance through their workplace, but of course, that doesn't cover everything. And she has very generously offered them a significant discount. And all of them need significant dental work done. They had not had dental work done for years in Ukraine. And so again, we were able to tap into our local connections in order to get that taken care of. They were all able to get the SNAP food assistance benefits. We also introduced them to the food bank. And we have some free little pantries or blessing boxes around town and a community refrigerator that anyone can access. We showed them where those were and took them to the grocery store and showed them how to navigate a United States supermarket and how to pick name brands versus, or pick store brands versus name brands and things like that. We also had to help them with employment applications. You may know that they all are eligible to work. The Ukrainians are, once they get to the United States, even if they don't have their official work authorization yet. However, some employers were reluctant to hire them until they did receive that employment authorization. We had one member of our congregation who quietly worked behind the scenes with members of the 3rd household to take them to various local businesses, help them fill out the applications, and his work paid off with both of them obtaining their first jobs. During this time, while they were waiting to get jobs, they all became really helpful. They were eager to help out in any way they could. And one thing we found that they were really helpful with was moving furniture. When we were preparing the first household, it was just all the mostly elderly men in our support group who had to move all that furniture. Once the young men started arriving that were young and strong, that was a great benefit, and they were more than eager to jump in and help with that. In fact, one of them is going to help us move some furniture again this week for our next household. Transportation to work, once they obtained employment, that was an issue. How were they going to get to work? They did fine with the bicycles for around town, but all of them except the young mother now have jobs at Pfizer Corporation, which is kind of on the edge of town, and we didn't think it was really safe for them to be riding their bicycles there. And so they have all now completed driver education, gotten their driver's license, and each household does have a car. Childcare was another issue. As in many places, childcare is hard to come by here. We did have the one little one who was not school age. She just turned 3 in December. Her mother actually was the first one to get a job. She got a part-time job in the food service at school, working 10 to 2. And while the father did not yet have a job, he was able to handle the child care. But then in November, he also got a job at Pfizer. And so then there was a period of time Pfizer was very cooperative in trying to work schedules around, families' needs. And so he wanted to work nights, and they did allow him to do that. But during his training period, he had to work during the day. So there were several of us ladies from our group that stepped in and did childcare for a few weeks until he was able to get onto his night work schedule. We did also help them. We took them to the bank, helped them each get a local checking account, helped them understand how to write checks, how to get credit cards, how to build up a credit rating, etc. And most recently, one of our members of our group, who is a retired CPA and tax preparer, has helped them all have their first experience with doing U.S. tax returns. So we have a lot of people in our group that have varied backgrounds and abilities that have been really helpful to us as we have navigated all of the expectations. Can we move on to the next slide, please? We want to kind of end our presentation today talking about the joys and challenges. The biggest joy, I think, for all of us is the relationships that we have developed with our new Ukrainian friends. It's fair to say that we consider them friends. I mean, really as close as family members, and I think they feel the same. Their hospitality is unmatched. We never go to one of their houses without being offered tea or coffee or a snack or an invitation to stay for a meal. Do you want to go to the next slide, please, Grace? This is just a picture of, the first family invited most of us in the welcomers group to come to their home for a meal. You can see her busy in the kitchen and him helping prepare too. And we also learned about the Ukrainian tradition. If you never return a pan empty. So anytime we would take them something in a pan that needed to be returned, they would return it filled with some delicious food for us. And that picture on the right-hand side is an example of one of the things that they sent back in one of the pans. The second joy or blessing, if you want to call it, for me, has been the commitment of our support group members. From the very first meeting about 18 months ago, their commitment for making this happen has never wavered. They have all continued to show up for the planning meetings we have had weekly for many months and offered their help and expertise when it was called for. I now want to have a few of them share some anecdotes of experiences they have had in welcoming our newcomers. Ann Stover, can you unmute and be the first one to share?
Hi, I'm Ann, and my husband and I were assigned to the third household that we have here. We were invited to the first birthday of any of the groups. She baked for us a very traditional Ukrainian Kyiv cake, K-Y-I-V cake, 14 layers high, had a wonderful filling in it. I've read the recipe. It's very complicated, and she spent the previous night, nearly all night long, making the cake for us. It was just over the top, and we just loved being there and felt so welcome. And it was fun to learn that the Ukrainian tradition is that if you have a birthday, you have your own party. And it's not usual that other people have the party for you. You have your own. Another thing that happened was that the junior high young man that came in that family is, of course, a soccer fan. And so we got him connected with a soccer team right away in the summer when they arrived. And so he joined that soccer team. The first time that we took him there, I was so impressed with the other team members being so willing in accepting him into their group and being welcoming to him. As it turned out, he probably had played not very much soccer in Ukraine, and most of it on the street. And he had quite a bit to learn. But it's fun for him to be involved in his favorite sport, football. The last thing that I might mention is that all of the Ukrainian families have found an ethnic market for them in Wichita, which we're so lucky to. It's an hour away, but it's still relatively close. And they find there a lot of ethnic food that they like to fix. And like now they with their cars, they can get there to Ukraine or to Wichita to buy their favorite foods.
Thanks, Anne. Bev, you had another anecdote you were going to share?
Yes, this has to do with the eighth grade boy getting ready to go to middle school. And so last August, he and I visited the middle school, which is where I taught for many, many years before I retired. And we practiced learning where the rooms were and how to use the lock on the lockers. And that was kind of fun. And he has done quite well socially, and we think academically too. We know that they use translation apps in all of his classes. His principal and especially his art teacher have kind of taken him under their wing, and he's supposed to eat only so many courses, so much for the free lunch program, but sometimes he just gets really, really hungry, we found out, and he will go back for seconds and maybe even thirds. And so I found out about that when the principal contacted me. And of course, his mother was not happy. Well, it turns out I think he still does eat as much as he wants, but the principal, out of her pocket, she pays for the difference. Then the art teacher, she noticed one night when she was on the road and watching the eighth grade boy go to soccer practice that he was riding an old bike. Well, it wasn't old by my standards. It was used, but it was a fine bike. But anyway, the art teacher, uh, gathered up donations from the other teachers and her friends, and they gave him a brand new, a wonderful bike that he now has. And he's just, relatively speaking, I think there might have been one little mishap socially, but that's pretty well taken care of. He has done very well at our middle school.
Thanks, Bev. John, Shock, do you want to share your experience working with the guys?
Sure. I well, before they all got their jobs, I was helping them at another lady in the house in the church, kind of do some odd jobs around her place. And so we were traveling together, going up and back. And um the younger guys live just around the corner from me. So as we worked together longer and developed more relationship, we got to know each other better. And since they lived so close, I could just go over and visit them. And hopefully, in all of that, just kind of help provide, some, oh, just general socialization and not have them feel like it's a, kind of official activity or something that's foreign to them or, brand new. I mean, yes, it was in a new place, but, we could just do things that were normal for them. And it just kind of maybe hopefully gave them a little chance to, feel like, okay, well, this is, home. We're just getting to act like we want to or whatever. And so they showed pictures and I showed pictures or driving sometimes, especially after they got their licenses. They wanted to try different things. And one time we were going in a pickup and they wanted to drive and have the windows down and turn the music up and, just kind of act cool. And they were taking pictures because they thought, oh, wow, this is really, we're Americans. And so they wanted to send them back to their friends or things like that. So yeah, we just kind of hung out and did normal things. And, when I went over, yeah, they offered food and stuff, but it wasn't like a kind of, I don't know, formal visiting. It was like, oh, hey, let's do this, or they would ask questions, like with their translator on their phones, they would say a word and be like, okay, what does this mean? Or is this okay to say? And I'd be like, well, yeah, that means that, but you generally don't say that in public or, to just anybody. Or, they'd ask, well, how would you normally say such and such? Because the translator maybe literally translated it, but it totally did not sound like a normal English speaker. So
Thanks, John. Sorry, I don't want to rush you, but we're getting towards the end of our time, and I want to give Beverly, Martin, can you briefly share your experience with the guys?
Uh, yes. Can you hear me? You
Yes,
see me?
please go
Yeah.
ahead.
Yeah. I'm Beverly, and I am the lady that John just spoke of. That I have a 150-year-old small acreage out here, and I had heard that the guys were bored at they're waiting for their other official job, and of course needed money. And I had been looking for people to help me take down a bunch of the very old trees that and 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 I was having problems finding really good workers or people that were willing to work. And boy, I had hired John, and then the two young Ukrainian guys and Joe. And oh my, I can't tell you how thrilling it was for me to see, them work, just get so much done and so fast. And one thing I realized, because I've had various people work for me through the years, and boy, these three guys, you would tell them once and they did it exactly like you said. They weren't checking their phones or any of that, and they were always funny. Joe usually translated, but yet I tried to, we tried to communicate too. And I enjoyed them so much. But the one thing I realized too was that, they were so much more compliant and followed my directions. And I thought, well, some had come from occupied areas by Russia. And so their work ethic and willing to comply would be very different than most of our independent Americans. And so that was kind of just a noticeable social thing. So, but yeah, it's been a great experience, and they've gone on to their jobs. And the two young guys say they work 60 to 72 hours now. So hard workers. So thank you.
Thank you, Beverly. Grace, if you want to just show the next slide, that's just some pictures of the guys when they were working out at Beverly's, and we had Beverly invited us for a group meal. And then if you want to go on to the next slide, just some different pictures of socializing and doing things with our new Ukrainian friends. Other blessings were the support from the congregation, the community as a whole, the support from the two resettlement agencies, which we've already mentioned. And we did realize that it does take a village. And our village included the 18 core members, plus our congregation, plus numerous community members and school personnel. Just very briefly, Carolyn, can you tell us about Roger's work with Muhammad and what that led to in our community?
Yes, of course. My husband, Roger, and I have a friend here in town that is a Muslim. And when we learned that all of our Ukrainian people were Muslim, we went to Muhammad and said, can you help us get them for prayers to the mosque? Well, the closest mosque is in Wichita, 50 miles away. And so Roger and Mohammed went to our church, to our pastor, and made arrangements for one of our rooms at the church to be turned into a prayer room for them. And so now they can meet there every Friday afternoon for prayers. And they have even found other people in our community who are Muslim who are joining them for prayers. So we're not only providing for their religious prayer time, but also helping them expand to get acquainted with others of the same religion.
Thanks so much, Carolyn. Along with that, we had Lilia, the elementary teacher who speaks Russian, and she and the other school personnel have been so helpful. And Bev was going to tell you about their experience with the YMCA, but I'll just say our local YMCA has been incredible by providing free memberships for our newcomers. If you can go to the challenges slide, Grace, along with the joys, we've of course had some challenges. You need to expect the unexpected and be flexible. Things won't always go as planned. The uncertainty of the approval times, I've already mentioned that has been a challenge for us. Language and cultural challenges, sometimes there have been misunderstandings, but we've worked through them all. We've learned that we need to exhibit cultural humility. Remember that our way is not the only way to do things and not always the best way. And so respect their culture and be understanding of that. We tried to consider the what ifs. What if we don't like them? What if they don't like us? What if we don't agree with the decisions that they make? We also need to be aware of the impact of trauma. All of our newcomers, of course, have experienced the trauma of leaving everything they know behind. And moving to a new country. All of them have lived in at least one other country before they came here. And so it's helpful to educate yourself about trauma and how we might, be understanding. The next slide, just very briefly wanted to touch on another challenge we had to consider was as we began the process of all the places in the US they could resettle, why would they want to come to a small community in Kansas? What did we have to offer them? And we know many of them wanted to go to more desirable places perhaps, but what we found that what we did have to offer was a welcoming, helpful community that has worked very hard to meet their needs and to help integrate them into our daily lives. And we have a lower cost of living than many of the larger communities. I'm pretty sure that when our newcomers came, they didn't necessarily think they were going to stay long-term in our community. I think they thought eventually they might move on to other places. But after living here for several months and obtaining good employment, making friends and connections in the community, I don't think any of them have plans to leave anytime in the near future. In fact, they are working with us to bring additional friends and family members here. So just in conclusion, I encourage you, we had to begin with the end in mind. The next slide, Grace. Keep focused on the ultimate goal of helping the newcomers achieve self-sufficiency, provide guidance and mentoring, but allow the individuals or the families to retain autonomy and give them advice when asked, help them to make decisions, but make the decisions with them and not for them. So I think we have just a couple minutes left for questions. Are there any questions that we want to ask?
Yeah, thank you very much. We do have about 5 minutes, and while folks are certainly welcome to come on to ask that question, I mean, we have room for just one, maybe two, depending on the question. And I'm also going to drop a link to a survey, so that's open, and we'll share that out as well in the follow-up email. But would love your thoughts and feedback. Thank you.
So if I could just jump in by telling a really funny story about teaching one of the ladies to drive. She had never driven anything, we've decided, ever, and was quite a challenge. And one or two of the gentlemen in our community took on as their challenge to teach her how to drive. And they actually did feel unsafe quite a few times, but they stuck with it. And now she is licensed and driving all on her own, and we're so glad.
I see a question there that asked, how do you secure employment for them? Initially, we just went to various employers in the community and helped them apply. But we were very fortunate to find that Pfizer Corporation, which has a large drug manufacturing plant in town, has a program specifically to welcome and employ refugees. So these are good paying jobs, and so all of our adults have now have employment at Pfizer, other than our young mom who is home with the child and still works at the school system. Well, let's see. What we were about to receive our first refugee. What was day one like? It seems daunting in terms of language and other factors. Tina talked about that a little bit. Yes, it is. And, none of ours spoke much English when they came, but you just do the best you can. Kind of, you can cross those communication barriers. We did use like Google Translate a lot at the beginning. But you know, don't be afraid. It all went fine. You can use gestures, you can you know, get your phones out, and we made it work. What's the name of the church? We belong to the Church of the Brethren in McPherson is our church.
I would say talk slow. The two guys that have continued to tell me that people talk too fast. Now, we're from Kansas, and when they say talk too fast, we talk fast and we put all of our words together. They need enunciated words.
Yeah. Any other? I don't see any other questions.
Yeah, who connected us to IRC? We actually became familiar with IRC before we had the Ukrainians. They're all over the United States. How close one would be where you are, I don't know, but they're very helpful.
There are, I think, 10 different resettlement agencies that are at various places around the country. Beverly Martin, you have your hand raised? No, someone else.
It's Lydia. Go ahead, Lydia.
Okay.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Good afternoon. Thank you for your presentation. What I did was me and my group, we went around the town to explaining what the Welcome Call program is all about and prepare the newcomers, because the people we're going to sponsor. But a lot of people are not welcoming of this idea, because they say all foreigners are coming here and this and that. And we're kind of having a hard time explaining, you know, the objective of our team, and explaining to people that the foreigners who are coming here, they're not coming to take their job or anything, but just getting some information. We checked with the resettlement program here. They told us they are not involved, so we're not sure. So we're just walking around in the bag, and we're waiting for our application to be accepted or rejected. What advice can you give us, and how we can go about dealing with the community?
I'm sorry to hear that, Lydia. That absolutely is not the experience we've had here. I mean, we are fortunate that our part of Kansas has a history of accepting Ukrainians from back in the 1800s. So we do have some, you know, background with that. But I'd be happy to talk to you individually, Lydia, if you want to contact me. Can we put my contact information in the chat, or my email address or phone number? I'm fine with that. And if Lydia or anyone else has, you know, questions that we didn't get answered during this time, I'd be happy to talk to you individually.
Yeah. Thank you. And I do want the conversation to continue. And I think there's some great ways to connect. I think what I'll do is we'll end the recording now. And what I'll do is in that follow-up email, yeah, I can make sure that it's dropped there in the chat, but also in the follow-up email, collate some resources and some ways to connect and get some guidance on this. And in addition to maybe connecting you, I think that peer-to-peer connection can be a really great resource. But we're already about a minute over time, so I respect people's times. And just to end by saying thank you so much to all of you. It was really great to hear from you, and I think it was very valuable to hear directly from your on-the-ground experience and your insights. So thank you so much. And that concludes our Lunch and Learn. Take care, everybody.